Are you there?
Yeah.
Have you received any visitors?
There are no members of the public.
And do you need an address? Can you reconfirm where you are?
Sure. I'm at San Diego Central Library, 330 Park Boulevard, San Diego, California, 2100 floor, floor 4.
Thank you. In place of my President-elect report, we will have a special video presentation in a few minutes. Can I get a approval of the minutes for October 19 board meeting?
So moved.
Can I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, first and second. Can I have a roll call? Oh, I'm sorry, any discussion? No discussion. Okay, have to ask for that. Any comments from the public? Okay, now we'll take a roll call.
Dr. Zissou,
Yes,
Dr. Lally,
Here, ma'am.
Dr. Buhari,
I wasn't present at that meeting.
Megan Blair, Andrew Marino,
Yes.
Claudia Mercado.
Yes.
Sabrina, can the board members that were not present still vote? Yes.
And yet, because you can read, can't you?
I read it.
Okay. Where are we now? Any more time for the video?
Thanks.
All right, let's do the video. Okay, gonna drop the screen here.
We have two. We have one over here on the
Okay.
side.
Yeah, you can use that one, we can see it. So this is a brief video, which is regarding Dr. Donald Kirpin, who I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting. And this was a video that was put out in response to him receiving the American Osteopathic Foundation Lifetime Achievement Award. He was not actually at that meeting. His illness precluded him from being there. And Dr. Lally, myself, and Dr. Norman Finn, who's past president of the American Osteopathic Association, were there on his behalf. And this we thought would be a nice little tribute to saying goodbye to Don, who of recent had been our special consultant.
Why? Which one?
Yeah.
Kill the lights.
Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can't hear anything.
Yes,
Okay.
we're working on it.
This is current Governor Jerry Brown in his younger years. This is Matt Wyuker, our longtime executive director prior to Kathleen Greason.
If we just put a mic
I don't
next
know
to
who
it.
this is. This is.
I'm wearing a white coat, probably.
What if we just put a mic next to it?
Dr. Kirpin, and this is Dr. Ethan Allen.
Is that Yamako?
If he does go work, we can put that
Yeah,
on.
but no, he looks, I don't think that's, yeah. An interesting part about Dr. Allen is he was one of our oldest practicing osteopathic physicians and instructors. And in his younger years, he worked on the Manhattan Project. Very diversified.
He was a rocket scientist.
He truly was a rocket scientist.
He's still practicing. 2 days. 2.5 days.
Oh, well, somebody retired.
He's 95.
Only 95.
I think he's 95, right? 95, right?
Something like that, yeah.
His license number's like 2.
Let's try one more time. Please. It's not working either? No.
Is the volume up on the machine?
It does, but it's not sending it out.
There you go.
After talking with him for a while about the osteopathic profession, you want to be part of the profession because of that.
Every so often, the osteopathic medical profession is working on to find in its midst a pioneer who's dedicated to improving the profession through service, leadership, and dedication. Donald J. Kirpin, D.O., is a family man to his wife, kids, and grandkids, but also to his osteopathic family as well. Always focusing on the bright side, Dr. Kirpin lights up a room with his positive attitude, great sense of humor, and trademark baritone voice.
I graduated from an internship there when I was programs. Our profession, or the allopathic profession, so we went right and I practiced my first year in Houston, Texas. Outside of Houston, Texas, really, I was in a town called Shepherd, which was 70 miles northeast of Houston. It was only doctor and accountant. Had 16,000 built-in patients. So, made me a better doctor, I think.
In 1979, just 12 years after he graduated from the University of Health Sciences College of Osteopathic Medicine in Kansas City, Dr. Kirpin began his career in academia. He spent 24 years at Western University of Health Sciences. Starting as an associate professor of family medicine, he quickly moved up the ranks until he reached the top position as university provost in 1995. Dr. Kirpin's political career quickly flourished, both locally and on the national level. Over the years, his involvement in the profession has earned him the top spot many times over, serving as the president of the Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons of California, the Osteopathic Medical Board of California, the American Osteopathic Association, and the American Osteopathic Foundation. Along the way, Don has touched many lives and developed countless friendships.
I consider myself one of his best friends. And mind you, there are several others that Don has made feel as though they were also his best friend. Bill Shovel, Alan Cruz, Ed Lansky, and others will tell you, oh yeah, I'm his best friend. I said, no. Don makes us all feel like we are his best friends. That's one of his loving characteristics. He was a born leader. He was a fighter at one time. He was a boxer at one time. And these qualities come out and throughout his life. And that's exhibited by the fact that when he had his recent health problems, he certainly didn't lay down and just not fight to get back where he's at now. He's made a tremendous recovery, and that's because of his personality. And as a result, I just love the call friend of Don Kirpin.
Dr. Kirpin is a leader, a mentor, and a gentleman. His perseverance and eternal desire to serve has resulted in a lifetime of achievement and dedication to the osteopathic profession.
That was the time that was during my presidency here. I believe was involvement of young people at the AOA leadership. leadership levels.
He has the ability to light up a room so that when he walks in, you want to be part of his conversation and to listen to what he has to say.
When people hear us together, giving each other tell about something, they say, those guys really don't like each other. They don't know that only brothers can do that.
The American Osteopathic Foundation is proud and honored to present Donald J. Kirpin, DO, with the AOF Lifetime Achievement Award. Thank you, Dr. Kirpin, for all you have done to promote osteopathic medicine throughout your career.
The only reason that I really like Don Kirby is because of his wife. He's an absolute Jew, and I told him that he is not a worshiper.
He's probably the only osteopathic leader that I know that knows how to pick out a good melon. He was a kid, he raised him to go out, and he really has gone out there and shown me how to knock on a melon and say, this is good, this is right, this is what we got to do. And he's the only one I know who can do that consistently.
Well, thank you for watching this video. It means a lot to all of us who knew Don for 30 plus years, and he was a great man for the Osteopathic Medical Board of California, serving as on the board. He was president of the board. He then was executive director of the board. Angie worked with him. How many years, Angie?
Almost 30.
Angie was with Don over 30 years, this time on the board. And then, pardon me? You started working when you were 10, right, Angie?
Yes.
And then, after Don's illness, he was no longer able to function in his position. We were blessed to have Angie come in and take over executive director. We couldn't get rid of Don no matter what we did. It was like a bad penny coming back, but he stayed on as a part-time consultant and helped us along. And he's going to be greatly missed. So thank you. Okay, now for a tough act to follow. We'd like to have our guests come and talk to us. Dr. David Field, Chairman of the Natural Medicine Committee. Update. Would you like to speak to us?
Good. Will you have us?
Yes.
Very good. Don't forget Dr. Brian Thompson, also giving on the
Welcome.
Medical
You'll need a microphone. He'll bring you a microphone.
Thank you.
You're going to feel this. We don't have an audio portion of our
Okay.
show.
Sure.
Thanks for having us. How are you?
Yes, well, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
I can hear you. Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my attorney, thank you so much for having us speak this afternoon. As he introduced me, I'm Dr. David Field, I'm the chair of the Osteopathic Medical Committee, and we are housed under you in terms of the Department of Consumer Affairs construct. If you can see the slides either behind you or here, they're just going to be an outline of where we're going to go. Next slide, please. So what is naturopathy? This is a little table of contents of what we're going to be discussing today, which is the practice with the doctors. So let's start with what are naturopathic doctors. It's been observed to me that, well, wait, hold on. I don't talk that fast. It's been observed to me that the naturopathic medical profession is in the same position that the osteopathic medical profession was in somewhere 30 to 50 years ago. We have schools, we have excellent education, we train wonderful doctors, but the our position in the medical practice world is different from state to state. Let's start with what naturopathic doctors are. We are trained in a wide variety of primary care and complementary and alternative therapies. And on medicine, what that effect is. We're trained in minor office procedures and naturopathic childbirth attendance. I'll let Dr. Dar speak to this. She practiced in Hawaii for years, where naturopathic physicians have the privilege of childbirth attendance there. We perform hormone replacement. We use herbal, homeopathic remedies. Nutrition and diet is a major part of our practice. All of this, physical medicine, counseling, health and lifestyle. Hang on a minute. A couple of slides. One more slide back. I'm on the wrong page. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Well, here we go. We can give a brief history of the naturopathic profession in California. Firstly, I began my studies here in California, but the school folded for a variety of circumstances, including the fact that there was no opportunity for the students to practice in a clinic because there were no licensed naturopathic doctors in California in 1981. So I completed my education at the National College of Naturopathic Medicine, which has been around since 1956, up in Portland. When I returned to California, I co-founded the California Naturopathic Doctors Association, and we went to work in the legislature over the next 17 years. And finally, in 2003, California became the 13th state to recognize naturopathic medicine, as you know. And the public is served to protect the public by the Naturopathic Medical Committee, which issues the licenses and supervises the practice of the doctors. There are 17 states, including the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, that have licensing laws for naturopathic physicians. And the illusion here is that in most other states, my Oregon license said that I was a naturopathic physician. When we pursued the licensing law in California, the California Medical Association, the term physician would not be granted to anyone other than the medical doctors or osteopathic doctors, osteopathic physicians. So we are licensed as naturopathic doctors.
So one of the things that makes naturopathic medicine distinct is our philosophy. Many of the therapeutics are similar to what a medical doctor and osteopathic doctor would use. But in naturopathic medicine, one of the first classes we take in school is philosophy, so that every patient, every disease process will be approached through this specific lens in our goal towards coming to a state of health. And we have several points of philosophy that we focus on. The first is used in all of medicine, which is the idea to first do no harm. And for us, that means that we really want to focus on our methods of treatment, not causing more harm to the patient than the disease process that's already there. And that seems like a simplistic philosophy, and yet I think all of us know of medical situations in which that has not happened, where the process of the medicine has actually caused more harm to the patient than the original disease that they had. And one of the gifts of medicine is the low risk of side effects of many of our modalities. When you use lifestyle interventions, when you use nutrition, when you use botanicals effectively, those things have a very low risk of harm to the patient. And that's one of the great benefits of our medicine. We always want to identify and treat the underlying cause of a condition, so we don't want to just treat someone symptomatically. We want to see what the underlying cause of their condition is and address that to get a more effective treatment. We work a lot with educating our patients about their bodies and about their health. I like to view my patients as partners in their wellness because they're in their bodies 24 hours a day and they can give me really important information. So it's my job as a doctor, and it's a naturopathic doctor's job to educate their patients about what they need to be looking for, what they need to be and informing us so that we can help them. We also want to treat the whole person, so if somebody comes in to me with a headache, I don't want to just give them a painkiller to take the headache away, although I may do that, because treating symptoms is very important. But I also want to understand their background, their genetics, their other stressors, the other aspects of their health. Maybe their headache's coming from a cardiac condition, maybe it's coming from a nerve compression. If I don't try and look at them as a whole person, if I just look at them as their symptom, we're not going to actually be able to help them. And of course, our final philosophy is one of prevention, which I think naturopathy excels at because of our focus on things like diet, lifestyle, understanding the avoidance of certain toxins in the environment, etc. Because so many of the diseases that we are dealing with as doctors every day can be prevented with effective interventions earlier on.
So what are naturopathic doctors? And I guess I jumped to this slide early on, but there is a naturopathic oncology society, there's the Botanical Medicine Society, there are a few other specialty societies. All of this stuff, these are all modalities that almost every naturopathic doctor uses, and I don't have to go through them. You all understand this, you're all doctors yourselves. Education for a moment. So, naturopathic doctors, our education is on a par or even exceeding in some cases the education in medical schools and osteopathic medical schools. The student would require a bachelor's degree, it's sort of an obvious thing. There are 4,100 hours of training in clinical sciences, philosophy, modalities, naturopathic medicine. And then we have at least 2,500 hours of instruction, at least 1,200 hours of supervised clinical training or internships or externship, whatever language you'd like to use. We are trained in both natural and conventional therapeutics because many of our patients come in using conventional therapy, or we also need to recognize those situations where there is a therapy that may be more effective than the natural therapy that we could offer the patient, and we refer to an osteopathic physician or to a medical doctor or counseling or whatever we think is the most appropriate. For example, we have a requirement for 72 hours of pharmacology. Now, in our statute, we have the right to prescribe hormones, natural and synthetic. So, interestingly enough, I have a DEA number. I can prescribe a controlled substance, testosterone, but I can't prescribe amoxicillin for a ear infection. So we've been working in the legislature for a number of years to try to right this situation in neighboring states, Arizona, Oregon, Washington. Naturopathic doctors have a much broader scope, which is much more commensurate with our training, and we serve the public there by being a full scope primary care type of doctor.
Just wanted to elaborate on that as well, and the idea that just because we are therapeutics, our goal, again, is to use the method of treatment that's going to cause the least risk of harm and be most beneficial to the patient, and sometimes that is a pharmaceutical. And I have to stress this to my patients all the time. You know, they come in and they have some sort of infection and they want a natural therapy for it, and I have to educate them on the fact that the therapy that has the least risk of harm and the least potential for side effect may actually be an antibiotic in this particular situation. And, you know, as naturopathic doctors, we have a lot of different tools, and so we're certainly not over-prescribing antibiotics or anything like that, but we want and are trained in a wide variety of medicines so that we can provide for our patients the thing that is going to be the least possible risk for them. When I began our practice there, we did not have pharmaceutical prescribing.
Experience.
In the first year, we kind of learn how everything in the body works, and the second year, we kind of learn how everything in the body goes wrong. And then after that, we learn how to fix it, and that the broad scope of modalities Institute of you can get a master's in nutrition or in acupuncture along with your naturopathic medical degree, and of course those students are going to have slightly different this is in the different training of naturopathic, allopathic, and osteopathic educations, and you can see they're highly comparable. There is a little bit more hours spent on physiology in naturopathic medical education, and it's understand based on our need to understand the intricacies of how those body systems interact for some of our natural therapies, why that would be required.
So after completing education, naturopathic, as I alluded to, the Oregon board subcontracted the 2-year portion of that exam back in the day. And after, I guess, around 1990 or so, it was the formation of the NPLEX, or the Naturopathic Physicians Licensing Exam, and very similar to every other medical examining body. I did want to say that the naturopathic medical schools have to undergo a rigorous accreditation process. The school that I went to in Portland is overseen by the same accrediting body that oversees the organization. Reams school. And similarly, the NPLEX ensuring that the candidates for licensure are indeed competent after practice. So, California is the channel through which the public can register a complaint about whatever we've been around. Practice where the state of California had numerous doctors who received certificates from various mail order schools for, whatever thousands of dollars they paid. With an 8-year-old type 1 diabetic child brought. The doctor informed the woman that the insulin that she was giving the child was poison, and that he could cure the girl in 2 weeks using his remedies. And, unfortunately, the child passed away as the medicine, proper medicine was withheld. We all know that this is why we in this room exist, is to protect the public from charlatan practice. And I want you all to be able to rest assured that the Naturopathic Medical Committee vigorously goes after complaints of unlicensed practice, deceiving the public to think that they're seeing a well-trained and licensed doctor, as well as keeping an eye on our own. As we saw this morning, even the best graduates from school can fall, and we need to regulate our own, and this is what the Naturopathic Medical Committee continues to perform the duty of. Our next slide sort of breaks this down in terms of that we have 87% of the work of our committee is against unlicensed practice. I would venture to guess that less than 1% of the Osteopathic Medical Board is regarding unlicensed practice. I mean, who hangs out a shingle as an osteopath or an osteopathic doctor? And which brings me to a slight tangent. We have been working with the legislature. As you know, the making of legislation resembles the making of sausage, and it's not for the faint of heart. When we passed our original licensing bill, we had arrows flung at us from every corner of California, including the graduates of those unaccredited mail-order schools, who complained that licensing naturopathic doctors would put us out of business. So the legislature accommodated them by allowing the term naturopath to remain as an unregulated title. So I would never call myself an osteopath. That would be, holding myself out to practice in a profession that I'm not trained in or licensed in. So we're working with the legislation to try to correct this problem, and of course in the future appreciate the support of our other board here as our effort continues. So this is licensed versus unlicensed cases. And in terms of our licensees, our biggest issue is advertising. We've had some problem with unprofessional conduct, and there have also been some disciplinary actions by other agencies. Some of our licensees are dual licensed, such as I am. I'm licensed also by the Acupuncture Board because when I moved back to California in 1985, there was no licensing for naturopathic doctors. I'm now an outlaw, went to acupuncture school, got a license, started practicing. And I can speak to malpractice for just a moment.
Okay.
Malpractice insurance. Most malpractice companies issue the same policy to NDs as they do for osteopathic physicians or medical doctors, but the cost is substantially lower due to the low risk that naturopathic practice presents to the insurer. I have this data from an agent an insurance broker in Arizona. Now his agency insures naturopathic doctors, insures osteopathic physicians, and insures medical doctors. And he quoted me the rates for family practice, the same sort of practice, same privileges. We're not talking about OB or neurosurgery or higher risk specialties. Within that framework of family practice, naturopathic doctors practice extremely safely. This is not me just tooting a horn. This is based on the data, actuarial data from insurance companies, which aren't, all, kumbaya and let's eat herbs and flowers. They're a bottom line business. So this is a testimony to the safety of naturopathic medicine. If I can move along here, we'll have. Oh, well, there you go. Across the nation. Here we go.
I'm a member of our formulary subcommittee, which consists of myself, an MD, and a pharmacist here in California. We're clarifying the scope of prescription rights for naturopathic doctors, and also looking at potential scope expansion because, of course, of the issue of consumer protection of patients being able to get the medication they need and have the safest possible treatment. And in most other states, NDs have a full formulary, which includes a variety of different drugs. As with osteopaths and MDs, the formularies do vary from state to state, but not with any large changes. And for example, in Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, Arizona, naturopathic doctors will have rights to prescribe most legend drugs as well as certain controlled substances, which does vary somewhat from state to state. And this is a significant part of both our education and our ongoing continuing education training. Now, most naturopathic doctors don't prescribe a lot of drugs even when they have prescription rights because we have so many different modalities to choose from. And so the majority of times that we're prescribing drugs are in urgent situations like antibiotics, bioidentical hormones, which we're extensively trained on, and in the very common scenario for a naturopathic doctor, which is weaning a person off medication which they no longer need. So we're not legally allowed to wean a patient off legally prescribed. So if a patient comes to us and through diet and lifestyle, we're able to help them lower their weight and their blood pressure comes down and their blood pressure is starting to be dangerously low on their current medication, we are not allowed to wean them off that medication and lower it unless we have a supervising MD or DO that gives us the right to do that in the state of California. So that's a significant consumer protection issue and doesn't really make a lot of sense. And that's what we're trying to remedy here. Anything to add on that?
No, I think you hit the the same topic.
Our formulary is exclusionary, and so currently we have 2 exclusionary formularies, one for practitioners who do not have a supervisory relationship with an MD or a DO for the prescription rights, and one for practitioners that do. If anyone's interested in seeing an exclusionary formulary, we'd be happy to get it to you for review.
So, talking about naturopathic scope of practice again. Okay, back up here pretty quickly. Oh, whoops. Oh, that's fine. When the law was passed, when the statute was passed in 2003, the statute includes 2 provisions for study. The legislature charged the naturopathic, well, let's call it the Naturopathic Medical Committee, charged the committee with creating subcommittees and reporting back to the legislature on prescriptive rights for naturopathic doctors, and also the right and privilege of naturopathic doctors to perform minor office procedures. So these reports have been prepared and updated over the last 10 years and presented back to the legislature. The composition of the committee performing the reports, well, Dr. Thompson is the chair of the subcommittee on the formulary, and as she mentioned, there's also a licensed pharmacist and a licensed medical doctor on that subcommittee, and their recommendations are, fairly nonpartisan. That's the idea, is with this group of people to chime in. What do naturopathic doctors really know? What can naturopathic doctors really safely do? And how can we protect the public? And how can we also protect the public by providing the public with adequate care? It's a harm to the public to not have, as Dr. Kirkman said, he was in a county where he was the only doctor with 16,000 citizens. So California faces, as Dr. Thompson said, this shortage of primary care. This is an issue for all the healing arts professions, and we as naturopathic doctors have a role to play in helping with that crisis. As we move along in the legislative world, we intend to have the scope of naturopathic doctors' practice expanded to cover the full extent of our training. Not more. We're not looking to do open heart surgery. We'll leave that to the osteopathic physicians. And there are osteopathic physicians who do perform heart surgery, right? Yes. Yeah. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking to be able to practice as we were trained and as we have safely served citizens in all the neighboring states. We'd like California to catch up. We'd be happy to entertain any questions from anybody, public members, doctor members, executive officers.
Students, do you have any questions?
I have a question. My name is Kanisani. I'm a second-year osteopathic medical student at UTC University. Going back a couple slides to the comparison we had between the hours spent on learning the different subjects of basic sciences between naturopathic, allopathic, and osteopathic.
We're getting there.
So my question was, do the hours totaled under allopathic and osteopathic include those spent learning in residency? Because that is one aspect of our training that allopathic and osteopathic physicians are required to undergo.
No, this chart, which is reprinted from the Journal of Family Practice, is only about during the 4 years of school.
Okay. So my only comment would be that since we're making comparisons between the 3 distinctions of medicine, it would be fair to include residency training as well for allopathic and osteopathic physicians, because that is a requirement for us to be completely licensed as practicing doctors. Thank you.
Right. Let me let Dr. Thompson address this.
Well, I think it's an excellent point, and it's one that we are absolutely working to address. naturopathic doctors are do have the option of completing residency. I currently have 2 naturopathic residents that I supervise in my clinic. Because the majority of naturopathic doctors have private practice, we don't have the option currently of doing hospital-based residencies, although we would love to have the ability to send our graduates to standard hospitals for residency. That possibility doesn't exist for us right now. And so in order to meet that need for continued training and residency, we do need to do that in a private practice setting. There are a few naturopathic residencies in hospitals. Most commonly, the Cancer Treatment Centers of America have multiple locations throughout the country that host 2-year naturopathic residencies. And our goal is to provide residency for all of our graduates, at our earliest possibility. Because I do believe that you finish school being able to practice and become the best doctor. And after 15 years in practice, I can say, quite honestly, that I learn something new almost every day.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
First, I want to just maybe clarify what's your ask from the board.
This is more or less an informative presentation. We presented we presented this presentation to the Medical Board of California a couple of months ago, just because many people have never even heard of a naturopathic doctor, and it's good for all of the professions to understand how we interrelate and so we can serve citizens better. So, other than our full scope of practice as trained, unfortunately the board doesn't have the authority to grant us, but our ask would be for the support of the board as we move forward towards that goal, so that we can work in collaboration with all of the other medical arts.
And what are your numbers in California in terms of licensing?
I'm going to defer to our executive director who knows everything.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Mitchell. I'm the executive officer of the committee. The last time that I ran a report, which was about 2 weeks ago, we're currently at about 816 active licensees here in California.
And do you feel like the fact that it's not recognized is prohibiting people from entering the profession?
So what we recognize, we actually have one of the really good school here in California down in the San Diego area. And when we see the graduates coming out, they want to stick around because California is obviously a lovely place to live. But then they start having their patients come in and they're very restrictive on what they can do. Somebody comes in with a sore throat, they can't give them an antibiotic. They have to have that patient go to see another primary care physician that would be able to give this to them. And it's causing some problems. And we see that after the first license cycle, they're giving up their license and going to a neighboring state where they have a full scope. So that is, and then we get people calling from, patients that lived in Oregon, came down to California thinking they were going to get the same naturopathic care, and they just don't. So it's not serving the consumers here in California the way that the neighboring states allow.
Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. How'd the medical board do with your presentation?
They were very receptive, actually. It was, I would say, even beyond cordial. They asked really good questions and wanted to know how we could work together, things like that.
Go ahead.
How are you guys dealing with the cannabis issue, and how do you go about dealing with that in your practice? I know that's something that's coming up on the medical board. And you should probably talk about this here. Yeah.
Sure. We are seeing some problems right now where an individual who has a recommendation from a physician goes in to see their actual primary care doctor, who's an ND, and they can't discuss it because they don't have a recommendation right to give the cannabis because it's a Schedule I. It's in the Health and Safety Code, so even we couldn't change it within our statute. It would have to be changed within the statute of the Health and Safety Code. So what we're asking right now, and I've got a meeting with the Cannabis Control Bureau next week to see if there's a way that we can get consulting privileges so that when we do have a licensee who has a patient present to them, that they're allowed to discuss, if they're taking cannabis or using cannabis for medicinal reasons, or now that it's legal as a recreational drug, if they come in and say, hey, yeah, I'm taking this, there's a lot of different herb interactions that could be, come up with that. So we definitely want to make sure that our licensees have the ability to perform their jobs correctly and to make sure that the consumers are protected.
And also, in terms of your CMEs, I know there's a body of that decides the CMEs for you guys, but have you got an approach about doing like a CME on the cannabinoid system and educating your doctors out?
At each of the last, I attend the National Naturopathic Conference every year, and at each of the last 5 or 6 or 7, I guess, because this is an issue in more states than just California. We have doctors in Colorado and Oregon and such, state of Washington. So there are presentations on medical use of cannabis at all of the conferences. The education is readily available to us. And I might say that better than a naturopathic doctor to prescribe this herbal medicine, or to recommend, I should say, this herbal medicine. But, the law was originally passed without including naturopathic doctors as having the privilege for writing the recommendations.
Let's say that with cannabis coming online in California, there are some issues. One of those big issues that potentially could affect all Californians is safety for pesticides being in the product. So I will, I guess, recommend proceed with caution. Just being able to prescribe it and then you're doing something good for the public. From what I understand, some of the product that's out on the market is not being lab tested, which could potentially put some patients at risk.
Right. Well, since we're not even in the zone of recommendation, and it's been happening for quite a while,
right.
Then I would actually turn the microphone around and put the warning back on the osteopathic physicians,
right,
who do have the right to prescribe.
I mean, just to clarify, what we would like right now is to be able to discuss interactions with our patients if they are already using cannabis medicinally or recreationally, and how that might interact with the other recommendations that we are giving them.
And addressing the opiate crisis as well, right? Getting the drugs.
Now, as you're probably aware, despite the existence of all of us, anybody can go on the internet and purchase CBD, cannabidiol type products without recommendations, without prescriptions, and without federal oversight. And Ms. Mercado, I totally share your concern about the contamination of these products, the lack of oversight. And I believe that the Cannabis Bureau is actually passing some sort of regulation, certainly around testing, but even to the point where all cannabis products need to be certified organically grown. So, having been an organic gardener for 40 years, I'm with you on that. Thank you for bringing that up, and I hope you pursue it with the other authorities.
Well, thank you again. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing how things continue and how things evolve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call on Mark Ito, who is from the DCA Budget Office, and he will give us a budget update. Pull up to a comfortable microphone and
Does any of the board members need a copy of the
if anyone is short paperwork,
Good afternoon, everyone. excited to be here to present your budget report and to alleviate any concerns you have regarding your budget. My name is Mark Ito. Feel free to stop me anytime if you have any questions. I'll also answer any questions at the end of the presentation. All programs in the DCA participate in incremental budgeting, which means that the starting point of your budget is the previous year's budget act, which is approved by the governor. From their current year and budget year, adjustments are made through budget letters, budget change proposals, etc. The end result for this year for your appropriation is a $2.353 million budget, which is the figure included in this year's governor's budget. Your budget has increased a little bit, and the increase to your budget is primarily due to salary and benefits, which is a 4% increase for your rank and file staff due to the signing of the new union contracts. So the two handouts you got today, I have a fund condition for you, and I have a expenditure projection for you. We'll go with the fund condition first. So the fund condition shows prior year actual data for 16-17, as well as current year authorized for 17-18 and formula-driven calculations for the out years. Now the top section is the beginning balance. This is your beginning balance at the beginning of every fiscal year. And the second section is your revenue, and this is the revenue that you've collected or you're projected to collect in the outgoing years as well. And then your the third section in there is your expenditure section. That shows your appropriation. It shows how much you're paying for the fiscal system and for your statewide provider as well. And then the fourth section is your fund balance. That is your ending fund balance at the end of every fiscal year. Your fund is healthy. You guys do work with a slight structural imbalance where you're spending a little more than you're bringing in. However, you do have a $1.5 million general fund loan repayment that's projected to be paid back in 1920. That general fund loan repayment, we reassess your need every year for that loan repayment, so it could be paid sooner or it could be paid later based on the status of your fund. So at this point, your fund looks healthy based on this fund condition. So if you have any questions about your fund, about the fund condition, I can answer that now.
I do.
Yeah.
How much control do we have over our budget? I'll give you a good example. We do CEO, ED evaluations every year.
Okay.
And within there, we have the right of prerogative to recommend or suggest either an increase or a COLA or something. And it just seems that never really gets anywhere. Mm-hmm. So if this is our budget,
yeah,
we're saying that we'd like to allocate some of this money to reward someone that's worked hard, why do you guys say no?
So if your board is able to absorb that cost, we can realign your budget. So for the different line items, so you can pay out that. But if it's something that you're not going to be able to absorb, it's something that I'll have to work with Angie, and then we can submit a proposal, a budget change proposal to add dollars to your appropriation.
And at one point, Angie can correct me if I'm wrong, we actually had a surplus that was swept by the governor's office that we were told we would get back.
That's that 1.5
That's the 1.5 he speaks of. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes.
And the no on the EO raises doesn't come from the DCA budget, it comes from agency.
Agency?
Yeah.
I apologize. Is agency coming to talk to us?
They said yes this time.
All right, so the next handout we have is your expenditure projections. So in lieu of receiving expenditure reports out of the fiscal system, I have an expenditure projection for you. We are able to manually track kind of your significant line items. For example, your personal services, investigations, Attorney General, Office of Administrative Hearings, your pro rata. So we are able to manually track those expenditures, which make up approximately 85% of your budget. So I was able to put an expenditure projection based on the data that we do have, and then for the data that we don't have, I use past year actual data from last year. And my plan is to work closely with Angie to kind of go over what she anticipates spending this year that she didn't spend last year, and likewise, maybe you guys had a significant purchase last year that's not going to happen this year. So I'll sit down with Angie, kind of figure out what those line items that we can't pull at this point, what they're going to look like. And I'll continue to do that until we begin receiving these expenditure reports. But based on this projection, it's a reversion of approximately $57,000, which is 2.4%, which is in the realm of what we find to be appropriate in the budget office. So I have no concern over your budget at this time for your projections. So if you have any questions, I'll answer them at this point.
You're not going to relocate offices at this time?
Oh, we're not relocating, we're renovating the current space.
Yes, there is an increase to your budget for the one of the major purchases for you guys to stay in your current facility is to renovate your filing space. So you guys are going to purchase a high density filing cabinet, which is going to be able to keep all your files in a much smaller space. So we were able to increase your appropriation to purchase that, and then I'm working with Angie to kind of see how much money we can put aside this year, because there is a mechanism to put aside money from previous fiscal years to pay for moving expenses for renovation. So I'm working with Angie to do that.
Any other questions? Sir, thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Awesome, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
I'll return the meeting back to participants.
Thank you, Dr. Lavelle. You have some experience doing this, don't you?
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Next, we have item number 11, which is regulations update and possible actions.
Ryan, go first.
Ryan Markroff.
Yeah, Ryan Markroff, fellow board members.
Welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I am the Deputy Director of Legal Affairs here for the Department of Consumer Affairs, and wanted to. I'm on the agenda to provide the update on
Guidelines and uniform
1663. This is the Disciplinary Guidelines and Uniform Standards Regulation. The regulation basically was to accomplish three things. One was to update the. Is this microphone?
Sounds like it's dead.
Oh, maybe I can.
I can.
This regulation was to accomplish three things, basically to update the board's disciplinary guidelines, to incorporate the uniform standards for substance abusing licensees into the disciplinary guidelines and into regulation also. And then it had a third component that would have set a standard for whenever a proposed decision, a disciplinary decision, had a finding that a licensee had engaged in some sort of sexual misconduct. It would have required revocation in all of the cases listed in the regulation. So that was sort of the three purposes of the reg. The regulation has been working its way through the process for some time, and so part of my update is to just report to the board it's still winding its way into the process. The latest the regulation was submitted back in 2016 to the state's Office of Administrative Law. That office is the office that's required to approve all regulations before they take effect in California. The office disapproved that regulation and gave a pretty lengthy decision explaining why it was not approving the regulation. So staff had been working on updating it, and for the tail end of the time frame for updating it, we in the legal division had recommended maybe not putting this regulation forward in the form that it was, and instead using the most recent iteration and starting the process anew. And so what we are working on now is, in conjunction with your counsel, Ms. Knight, and myself and my team and your staff, is refining the disciplinary guidelines and the uniform standards based on the decision that we received from the Office of Administrative Law. And then the the going forward plan will be to bring that language back to you before you to consider and vote on, and hopefully approve at that point. And then that would give us the opportunity to initiate the rulemaking process. I think that the material that we have to start from here is pretty well developed, in that a lot of it had been through much of the process before, and so now we're refining it essentially, and just preparing it to start that process once again. So that's my update. I'm happy to go into more detail if the board would like, but I think what we chatted about with your staff was maybe, I think your next meeting is in May. We might have something prepared in advance of that. So one possibility would be to discuss with you and staff about having a meeting before then, just for the purpose of approving this language so we can keep it moving forward.
So this would be a potential action item for the upcoming meeting?
Correct.
Yet to be scheduled.
Yeah, we'll have to probably do a telephone conference meeting between now and May.
Just so I'm clear, this is 1663.
That's right.
So everything that I'm reading here that's underlined will be hopefully adopted by the administrative legal part, because we've already suggested this, right?
Yeah, so that I haven't carefully reviewed that. That wasn't proposed by me, but
it's very good.
It's very good. Well, good. But part of what we'll be doing is taking that language. Also, your board has some very lengthy disciplinary guidelines to impose in certain circumstances when you see licensees come before you in disciplinary matters. So that's actually a pretty thick packet that you would also be voting on approving. So you'd be voting on approving that text probably, as well as the guidelines themselves, which are essentially the board's decision on if a certain cause for discipline arises. These are the guidelines the board wants to impose in those cases uniformly.
So an example is there's zero tolerance for sexual issues, sex abuse and stuff like that. So with this as our vehicle, then we will add the detail to what we would do. Right, Sabina?
Correct, that would be the penalty guidelines. And so the document we referenced earlier in closed session where we talked about what the terms are, that would be updated as well. It'd be a whole entire package like that.
And just to piggyback off your last comment there, also on the, in particular on the sex offense piece, we'll probably spend a little bit more time on that piece at the next meeting, just to make sure everybody's got a full understanding of that component in particular, because that was an issue that OAL called out especially, and wanted a little bit, make sure that there was a little bit more explanation in the regulation file than it was, and so wanting to make sure then that this board understands.
So zero tolerance is an explanatory. I'm not sure why you guys would be putting into Greek.
So in the regulation documents, there's a statute that requires revocation in certain instances. This board had proposed a stricter policy than that, and the OAL was flagging that wasn't explained adequately, why there had been a stricter policy than what statute required. Does that make sense?
Thanks.
I'm happy to answer any other questions if folks have them. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Terry, are you doing 1606?
I just want to, board members, let you know that Ryan has been so helpful, and Sabina, of course, but we've never had this kind of service from the Legal Affairs Office before, and when Ryan took over, I mean, it was night and day, and so I want to thank you.
Brian, thank you so much for your service, and we look forward to continued cooperation and work with you, and make this a better system in which we're working. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you.
Great. So I am bringing before you language that you had partially approved a year ago, and we're adding new language that just became effective in our oversight bill, that SB 798, became effective January 1 of 2018, and they both, the new requirements deal with notice to consumers, so I thought, why not just add it to the existing ones since we're putting it through the regulatory process. So, the memo, if you look at that, gives you some history on the sections. Couple of things, for those that didn't go through this approval process, this notice to consumers is something that some offices do, but there was a feeling that not all patients generally knew that doctors were licensed by the Osteopathic Medical Board or their respective boards, and there needed to be some kind of notice, okay? So the first one was just giving just the board and its contact information. 798 included additional statutory requirements that wanted consumers to be notified of where they could check the status of the particular license, and that they had a right to file a complaint, and that the filing that complaint would be with the board. Okay, so if you look at the proposed language, the part that's existing is that first notice to consumer underline, ending with OMBC website. Okay, then the next two kind of sentences, to check the status of your physician and surgeon DO license online, go to the website, and then to file a complaint against the physician surgeon DO, complete the online complaint form. Those are the new language that we're adding. Not a big deal, but you just have to know what the language is that you're approving. And it was written specifically to comply with what the statutory requirement was, which was to reference an online complaint form. And so what I did is incorporate into your existing, one of the things that the board did, I thought was very good, is that they gave 3 options of how to provide this notice, which I think probably works well in a provider's office in all contexts. So we incorporate the notice to just add more wording for ours, but still allow for the same options that you had approved before.
Question?
And question? Yeah.
Once this is completely finalized, can we do distribution to all licensed doctors, email?
Yes.
Because then, I need to pay attention to this, I need to act on this, I need to comply with the law, and we're providing a service to them to help keep them informed and give them a vehicle by which they can use and distribute in whatever format is appropriate for their office.
And one limitation always on the emails is the emails are voluntary, so we don't have 100% of emails. We encourage people when they apply for licensure. I'll direct my attention to the students back there. When you apply for licensure, to give the board the emails so that they can email that. The board also created a physician-only listserv on our website for physicians to be able to get these kind of notices. Right now, we have 46 people that have signed up.
We can also, before the effective date, we can also update the website with nice banners
Yes.
talking about what's going to start at the effective date, prior to the effective date, and direct their attention to the regulatory language.
When we use the online license renewal process, does that automatically include their emails?
It's voluntary for the way.
Does it have to be voluntary?
It's actually, Sabina, you could be kick that to you. There has been a debate about why couldn't you require it since it's a business need, but there has been some pushback legally for why you can't require it.
For the online renewals, they do have to have an email in order to get on board and create an account. So for the doctors that are renewing online, we will have emails for them.
Okay.
However, those that are still sending in, a paper check and paper format, it's optional, so they don't have to provide us an email address.
Could we put a little flyer in on a returning their paper document to say why it behooves them to have an email, because we can do better distribution and keep you in the loop, just as a friendly.
Yeah, we can put it on the website. In order for us to put anything in a like the wallet ID card when it goes back, it doesn't go back from our office, it goes from KP Printers. So we'd have to make a contract with them as to what inserts we want to put in there and so forth. I mean, it's doable, but
it's doable, and there's a cost. The idea of doing business,
that goes back to budget.
It goes back to budget. Yeah, email is better, and it's just
writing those checks.
So what are we doing for the populations of Spanish-speaking people? are we gonna require this in Spanish if a doctor has a certain percentage? Because they have the right to complain as well.
Absolutely. Is that something that we should put in regs, Sabina? I would ask you to.
Yes, and before, if it's something the board wants us to explore, a lot of other boards have already done this notice to consumers reg, so it'd be a lot, really easy to see how they handle the same type of.
I'd like to see that.
Well, okay, so one language or all other languages, you call that Spanish, for example, are you thinking the requirement would be that they would have to translate it, or that we would have a translated version in our regs?
I think you should have a translated version.
So
We're
again,
requiring it.
I think we should look to other boards, how they did it, at many boards have already done this.
Because Chinese and Spanish, I mean, if
I
you
have
speak
another
in Southern California, you're behind the curve.
Again, this is out there, but what I was going to suggest is that the best option would be is if you had the option of choosing, that the doctor who did this online would have the option of choosing which languages you'd like to have this for your office, so that the program could do the translation for whatever doctor's needs are. So we don't have to necessarily be able to do that, but have a program that could do the translation to whatever language is appropriate for them. Whether that's possible or not, whether we can afford it or not, that's a different question.
It's possible, it's very expensive, so that's the biggest limitation. Some boards do have a very extensive language option of exactly that, where you just download whatever the document is in the language.
Google Translate.
But one of the difficulties with translation as a government agency, from my experience, is that there is no standards for translation. And when you as a government agency, put your reputation on the line and translate something and it's wrong, and there's any kind of misinnuendo in terms of dialects or whatever, people are like going, what is that board asking for? So that's a caution. And so in looking for good translators, it's been hard. You know, people translate, but quality varies greatly, and then price. It's very expensive. Although this is a pretty short document, so in terms of translation, it would be probably more affordable than other types of endeavors.
You could just put wording that says, Doctor, you're responsible to have this posted in your office for the language that's the majority of your office. Let them work it out.
Well, then what happens when there is how do we deal with those patients that are not fluent in English? They want to file a complaint. Who's gonna?
It's like an email.
Do we say reach out to us in Spanish and we'll return?
Claudia, we do get, very, very seldom, but we do get complaints in Spanish, and I have one Spanish-speaking staff that translates it for us.
Okay.
And if he's not available, DCA, I do believe, also has a translating unit that will translate complaints for us. However, when we respond in English, because I don't have anybody that can respond to them in Spanish.
And I think there's a legal requirement for it to be in English. Because to conduct the ongoing business of discipline and legal interaction, English is the approved language. And so
I just pulled up the board's, the medical board's notice of consumer regulation. It is very simple, like the one already drafted for you. What they did on their website is that they also included a link to like PDF for a signage for you to print out for you to post in your office.
By how many languages?
It's just how it is written for you guys in English. It doesn't reference any other language.
It doesn't reference any other language. Okay, so that would be the same as what the version you're saying that we have right now. No reference to how other languages.
Looks like it's a link where you can be proactive and download it to read the actual regulation. It's just like
Yeah, same.
we can take the extra step and provide that alternative model, which is having it translated and sitting there and
I don't know if the other member is still on the phone,
Megan?
but they cannot hear you if you.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Did you have lunch, Megan?
Should I have lunch? No, but I heard you guys had lunch.
I owe you 2 lunches next time I see you, okay? I'm sorry, Terry, where are we?
Okay, so if we did, what the medical board does, they have an additional language in their proposed language that says, go to this link.
No, but on their website, they have a link to the
Uh-huh.
sign for printing for the office.
Got it, okay.
And they have the regulation language as well.
It's the same language as ours. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, so then the question before this board is, if you want, some kind of accommodation for languages, then we probably, then this is not, then this language as is would not be ready to vote on.
Correct.
So you'd be wanting to have us do it.
Okay, this regulation is for physicians, it's not for the consumer.
Right.
So the regulation doesn't have to reflect any other language except English, because this is going to the physicians.
No, the
So-
physician's required, the consumer has to read it. So
Right,
it's-
so wouldn't it be up to the physician themselves to know what language they need to
Yeah, I
print it for
agree,
their office?
100%.
That's
Yeah.
why I said,
Thank you.
give it to them and tell them.
Right, so I don't think it
Okay.
needs to say anything in our regs.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Are we voting on this?
Okay, so then, are we adding any other language related to that, or are we gonna just vote as is to as proposed?
As is.
I'd like to have a motion on this.
Okay.
Please.
You're gonna have to, you're gonna have to wait for my special motion for
Yes.
regulatory
Yes.
language.
Yes.
And then it's a big long paragraph, and after I say it, you can say so moved.
Thank you, Sabina.
Oh, you gotta read it, okay. Sorry. So moved. No.
Quick question, is it
Yes.
fair to say that the website addresses and email addresses are gonna always be consistent, those are not changed, so that if it does change in the future, I wouldn't want the
Right.
emails to be then, not be able to function.
Yes. I think that the website will be, the same, I think our telephone number is gonna be the same. If there's any change, which usually typically you don't change your website, so that would probably be indefinite. The fact that we're not moving in terms of our facility kind of expansion, kind of guarantees that probably our phone number is gonna stay the same as well. So those are safe, as well as, and we don't have the address, because most of the focus was online in terms of the statute and as well as the access. So I think, the license search, that could change, but that was the new DCA license lookup. It was just unveiled now. My guess is that's not gonna change because it's a really good site, they'll probably keep it the same. And then ours, email is probably not gonna change either.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yes, no, it's a good question. And,
Read, Sabrina.
read Sabina. Go ahead.
Are we ready now for the motion?
We're ready for the read.
Ready. I move that we approve the proposed text for a 45-day public comment period and delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed regulatory changes if there are no adverse comments received during the public comment period, and also to delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any technical and non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the OPE plan.
That's so.
Please, a motion to accept the proposed language as offered by Sabina.
Do I have a motion?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Zamudo?
Wait, do we have to ask, is there any discussion? Any discussion or any questions from the grant? Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Dr. Zamudo?
Yes.
Dr. Lally?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Buhari?
Yes.
Megan Blair?
Megan?
Yes. Yes.
Andrew Marino?
Yes.
Claudia Mercado?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, what everyone's been waiting for, number 12, discussions regarding guidelines for the recommendation of cannabis for medical purposes, Medical Board of California. In your packet, you guys all have a packet of this?
Yes.
Okay, good. Rebecca, during the break, I ran into Rebecca and she told me that the podiatrists are recommending marijuana. I guess people must really have some bad foot pain. Recommendation.
Recommendation. This is
I mean,
on recommendation.
it's all recommendation.
Prognostics get you every time.
I just want to bring up the points that you made earlier in our discussion with the naturopath, the physicians, was the fact that right now marijuana is a Schedule I drug. And what the industry's been asking for, this is a lot for students too, is to descheduleize it or lower the scheduling on it so research could be done. Because nobody's going to do research on a Schedule I. If they take it out of Schedule I or take it out of scheduling altogether, then research could be done to determine what particles or what components can be best used for what purposes. Because there's a lot of anecdotal studies to say that this is good for pain, this is good for depression, this is good for PMS, and so on and so forth. But that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is that I have patients who are legalized marijuana growers for the state of California for medicinal purposes. But even within that sector, there's no standardization in terms of how it's grown, what the fertilizers are, whether there's pesticides or not. So that's where the difficulties with the product are, the fact that there's no way to guarantee safety. When you have a drug that's FDA approved, it goes through a whole list of trial, error, side effects, component, so when you get a Tylenol 650, you're getting a Tylenol 650. When you're getting a cannabis product, you may not necessarily be getting what you think you're getting. You're not always sure whether it's tainted or not, and that's the downfall. Jim?
Claudia can chime in, but one of the things they are doing is extraction. And with the process of extraction, they are able to get a pure form of the THC versus the CBD. Because part of the extraction process, the THC crystallizes around the edges as you move down. And there are actual research. University of California, Irvine has 2 grants actually as like a humanity exception. One is for the management of cancer patients with THC, and the other was multiple sclerosis patients with their neuropathic pain. And so they are making progress. The VA has approved it for the use of PTSD and for chronic pain that's based on opiates because they want to decrease the opiates. But you're right, we're still behind the curve, and our great Attorney General said, well, I'm telling everybody to go back and start whacking all that marijuana people, and each state is choosing to do or not to do. And allegedly our Attorney General is taking the position of, well, we legalized it here in the state. We just need to regulate it. We need to make sure that we have good quality.
One of the sidebars to that is the fact that my patient who was doing the growing for the medicinal, after it became recreationally approved, he stopped growing it because apparently there was a whole set of problems and issues with that. So I'm not sure that recreational use of it is going to improve where we were going medicinally with it, and it may detract from it because now you have no control of what your patients may be using or getting for medicinal purposes. So I'll get off the stand. And
Well, I have this. Sorry, I think I have a question.
oh, sure, go ahead.
Are there any moves to standardize the growing and the process and packaging of marijuana by the state of California?
Yeah, so currently they're under DCA. There's a Bureau of Cannabis Control. They're doing I believe a really good job in laying out the foundation for regulations along with the governor's office. They issue some emergency regs that are setting the foundation for how businesses should operate. We're still in a gray area where people's livelihood are at stake. Some people that thought they were going to be doing good financially or just good for personal reasons for other people that need medicine now are dropping off the business side. So there's a lot of challenges also with scaling up. When you scale up, you don't know what you're getting. Manufacturing a small amount of cannabis versus having to manufacture now liters or gallons of this product poses some challenges, and then having to source the flowers from indoor versus outdoor. So we're getting there, but we're not there yet. I also understand that there's a lot of product out there that is able to be sold without being tested, which puts a lot of people in danger and that jeopardizes public safety. So I guess the consumers are left to make that choice for themselves at this time.
which is of great concern because then when they engage physicians, I think the physicians have the burden of then having to deal with their medical conditions and not knowing how to address this properly or knowing where the condition might have come from because we don't have any data if they are consuming these products.
And the shortfall, of course, is that the physicians aren't well enough educated at this point, even where to start sometimes. And sometimes they learn from their patients who tell them about what they're just, again, anecdotally, and they don't have a certified source to say, well, I just read an article. And the time is going to need to come. Time will tell. So you might look back 10 years from now and say, hey, I was at a meeting when we talked about it. They still haven't gotten it straight.
But one thing that I do want to maybe bring up, I don't know if it's the right time for maybe adding CMEs to, is CMEs part of the health and safety code statute for all?
I don't believe that it's a requirement right now for any physician to have to take CME. I don't know, I didn't read the entire recommendation, the medical marijuana.
For marijuana.
For cannabinoids, just to understand the cannabinoid system, if there's such a thing.
I didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Well, I know at meetings right now, at the Federation of State Medical Board meetings, they've had talk about cannabinoids. And every year they talk about it. I don't know if state medical associations are doing much with it yet. Colorado probably is. And I'll be at a meeting in a couple weeks down in Austin, and there'll be 16 osteopathic boards there, and I'll talk to them to kind of get a consensus of what the cannabis issue is there. Bring that back.
I would offer that as anything new, it's going to be talked about. Hyperemesis cannabis is actually a DRG now under ICD-10 for those that use cannabis related to abdominal pain and the symptoms of gastritis. So, clearly it's coming into our lives whether we want it or not. So you're right. I think Claudia's in the right track. I just don't think that we have the ability to direct like they did for death and dying when the person died in San Francisco, and that's because the legal side got involved.
It would have to come from legislation, so we would have to have a legislator carry a bill and make it a statute before we can enforce it.
You could talk to Rohrbacher.
I guess my thing is how do we give the students a leg up, or how do we start to engage in dialogue too?
They probably know more about it than we do.
Well, people who live in, like Oregon, for instance, patients of mine who come back and forth, they seem to, again, have anecdotal knowledge of what's available, what works, and things like that. And so some of it's from, I think what's going to happen is the consumer market, like anything else, the market will drive which way things go, and things that work will work, and the things that make people sick will kind of drop off. Yes?
Speaking of the consumer market, so it's projected that the tax money that the state of California will get just from having it available recreationally will bring in a huge profit to California. But will we be able to use that money towards research? Do you know anything about in terms of the contradictory federally recognizing marijuana as a Schedule I? Will that cause any conflict in terms of what we do with that tax money?
Well, I think there's always going to be a problem as long as there's a federal conflict. And our DEA, our Drug Enforcement Agency certificates are federally issued. So when patients would ask me about marijuana, I'd say, well, it's against federal policy for me to recommend it, so I don't, because I didn't want to jeopardize my being able to prescribe federally controlled drugs. Other doctors, on the other hand, take a different perspective. I erred on the point of you never know when you're going to have a DEA agent in there undercover wanting you to do some things, and okay, that's what it's about. So I think that if there was a federal move to again drop down the scheduling, but that's legislative and political, and that could take 5 to 10 years. Who knows? Because different parts of the country all have different viewpoints. Okay, anything else on this?
If we ever have somebody come in front of the board with
DUI.
DUI, is that what it's going to be?
Yeah.
So like a doctor self-medicating with marijuana for be.
Well, even a doctor who's got it medicinally, still zero tolerance.
I mean, are you allowed to see patients under OxyContin,
No.
even if you have a prescription? I mean, you see.
You're practicing under the influence.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think at some point, we're gonna, as a board, need further education and gonna need expert presentations. So maybe, when I go to April, I'll be in Charlotte for the Federation's big meeting, and I'll sort of send out there to see if they're ready to do it.
I also have the director of the Cannabis Bureau coming to our next board meeting.
Oh,
that's awesome.
That's a good start. Thank you. Anything more on cannabis? So that'll be on our agenda for next meeting.
Right. I just wanted the board to look at the recommendation that the medical board has to see if you want to, I don't know whether it would be adopted, but to put it on our website for our deals as well. This is the medical board, so this is their guideline, but we don't have a guideline. And so I thought maybe it might be nice. And Kim Kirchmeier at the medical board has agreed that it would be okay for us to share. So this is the reason why I brought it to your attention, to see if this is something that you would want to put on our website, to say if you want to see the medical marijuana recommendation guidelines.
We need to vote.
Wait, does that mean we're going to adopt it?
Yeah, vote on it.
Not necessarily adopt it,
Oh, it's
but
not a-
if you agree with what is written, I think that right now, seeing as we have nothing for DOs,
But we got it today. Could we maybe just
absolutely. Yeah.
email ballot you on Monday or something?
Well, we could talk
What's
about
the-
it
what's
at the
the
next
rule on this?
teleconference, if you want to put it on the teleconference agenda.
Right, we're gonna have to agendize it if you wanna take action on it. It's just as a discussion item today, for its informational purposes.
Are we allowed to post it for informational purposes?
So, if you think this can't hurt, if you wanna take official action and like endorse it or do anything more with it, then you'd have to vote on it.
Are you allowed to put on there, this is for information only? I don't know. Does that help
You
you?
can put a link to, did they have it on the website already?
The medical board has it on their
You can have
website,
a
yes.
link on your website.
Go
so
to
not
that,
our
right.
How about that?
website.
A link,
Okay.
they can go and look at it themselves.
I just wanted
It's
to-
on their
Just for
website.
informational purposes.
Sure.
Right, and then if you guys wanna discuss it further, we can.
As a policy, that's what they okay.
Right.
got it.
Okay.
Thank you, Angie. Okay, next, the executive director's report. Ms. Angie Bird.
Thank you. But, you want me to move the microphone? I think I'm loud enough, it's okay.
I'm sure it's for me again. Oh, you won't be able to hear you without a mic.
Thank you.
Okay, this report is provided to the board members with an update on licensing statistics, staffing issues, continuing medical education, cures, and enforcement functions at the Osteopathic Medical Board of California, and no action is needed at this time. For the license statistics, as of December 31st of 2017, the number of osteopathic physicians holding a California license, active status, there were 8,486 physicians. Inactive status, 592, which totals 9,078. In addition to the above, there are 1,030 licenses in the delinquent status. And the delinquent status just means that for the 5 years, it stays in the delinquent status until it becomes a cancel. And the physicians have a right to reactivate their license within that 5 years. In-state licensees currently practicing in California, we have 7,291 active licensees. There's 53 physicians in California who hold an inactive license. Those are probably the physicians that are doing research or they've retired and they just want to maintain an inactive license. Number of applications received. From October 1st of 2017 through December 31st, we have received 216 applications. The number of licenses issued for that same period is 215. The number of days to approve a license application during that time frame was 41 days average. The applications that had missing documents that we had to contact the physicians for more information or to obtain the missing documents took about 106 days to complete and approve. Any questions on those?
Are you satisfied with the 41 days? Is that okay?
41 days I think is acceptable because we have to, put everything into the database. We have to bill them and they have to send in their license fee and then we process the license fee and then get them a certificate. So 41 days I believe is really reasonable. We'd like to cut the 106 days down, but unfortunately that's really beyond our control because we have to wait for the applicants to submit the documents that we need. Staffing, as you know, we talked about this earlier, that we lost our medical consultant, dear friend, Dr. Kirpin. He suddenly and unexpectedly passed away January 4th of 2018. Unfortunately, with a very heavy heart, we must fill our medical consultant position in order to continue our mission to protect the consumers of this state. So Ms. Machiko here has submitted paperwork requesting authorization to fill this position, which has been approved. And once we obtain a pool of qualified candidates, the board will conduct interviews and hire the best candidate for this position. The board office, the DCA facilities has been meeting, I'm sorry, questions?
Oh, I just wanted to ask, how will the board do the interviews? Because he has to come to the office and how many, do you want us all to interview them or do you want
Usually
three
for,
officers? Or?
usually for a panel for interviews, we'd like to have two, and probably physicians would be the best because they would know the type of questions to ask for medical knowledge.
Thank you.
And I think Machko checked today, and so far we have had no applications, and I think Ms. Greason will help us by putting word out that there's a position available. So the board office, DC Facilities, has been meeting with the property managers of our current location and with the discussions on the renovation of our current suite to provide space for additional cubicles have been taking place. Anticipation is that this project will commence around July of this year.
So it's cheaper to remodel than to move?
Much cheaper, about half the price.
Okay.
You guys feel okay to some extent?
We actually really like the location that we're at, and so if there was any way possible that we could stay there and have more staff space, that was our primary choice to begin with, and so I think we're going to do okay. Some of the staff aren't happy because their 8x8 cubicles are going to be reduced to a 7x7. So,
Is there room for expansion in the building?
well, not right now, but when we sign this new lease with the additional cubicles in our office, maybe in 3 or 4 years there might be a suite, adjacent to ours that become available. Then at that point we could talk to the management about possibly expanding.
Are they also like retouching, like painting and
Yes,
painting up?
everything will be included, right? Okay, and I think Dr. Zamuro talked about the budget change proposal earlier with the director of DCA, but we had requested a funding for expert consultants fees in a budget change proposal last year in 2017, and unfortunately this DCP was again denied. There will be no additional funding for enforcement budget in the upcoming year.
Can whoever the new consulting physician is, they be able to weigh in on this?
Well, the consultant will do our preliminary reviews of all our complaints that come through our office, but these are the experts that we rely upon for specialty. For instance, if we have an ortho case that the medical consultant who would use, or I'm hoping would be an internal medicine or family physician, may not be comfortable.
I understand. Who manages that list of who the specialists are?
They submit it. Well, Dr. Kirpin was the one that would approve their when they submit their CV. Unfortunately, at this point, if I get any CVs, it's going to go to the board for approval. Okay, so the next reporting is the Controlled Substance Utilization Review and Evaluation System, which is the CURES. DOJ provides us with quarterly reports of some of the statistics involving CURES 2.0, and this is the last quarter that we received. And as you can see, the different types of licensees and what their usage of CURES 2.0. So for the first chart, it was the number of registered users in CURES 2.0. And if we go down, you can see that the osteopathic physicians, we currently have 5,713 that are registered in CURES 2.0. And the total of all the licensees and other legal, for LEA, that would be the enforcement, DOJ admin, DOJ analyst, and the regulatory boards would be, Corey has access to cures, I have access to cures. Other boards also have the EO and lead analyst also who would look into cures for possible overprescribers. And so the total that we have in Cures 2.0 right now is 1,707,398. 177,398. And the next chart is for the patient activity reports. And it shows that these types of licensees, how often they run reports. You see that the osteopathic physicians in December of 2017 ran 30,905 PARs. Which shows that it's good use. So this is how many times the system was accessed by various license types. So the osteopathic physicians accessed the Cures 2.0 in December 13,469 times. And so every time they access it, they could run more than one PAR, and that's the reason why the number of PARs is much higher than the number of times the system was accessed. And the very last chart here is the number of prescriptions filled by schedule. To me, it's overwhelming. It's very, very high. 3,729,405 prescriptions were written in December of 2017. And they're separated by Schedule 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Do we have a breakdown of how many patients actually consumed or were?
I did not have a breakdown of that. They didn't provide that. But this is a number of prescriptions that were actually submitted to Cures. So it doesn't, it could have been 100 Oxycontins, but it's one prescription. Any questions on the numbers? Okay, and then in your packet you'll also see the survey. If you remember at the previous meeting we reported that the Cures 2.0 survey was being conducted by California Department of Public Health and the University of California, Davis, and the Medical Board of California, California Board of Pharmacy, and the Osteopathic Medical Board participated in the survey. And due to the time constraints and cost effectiveness, we chose the osteopathic physicians who were renewing their license in December of 2016 to participate in this survey. The invitation to participate was included in the renewal notice for approximately 500 physicians. Included in the agenda packet is the final report of by the author of the report. And this will also go on our website for others to see.
Out of the 500 that was solicited, how many they all participated?
That's in the survey. I don't have a copy of the survey, but it does say how many DOs actually participated. I think it was a pretty substantial amount. Put it this way, they were very pleased with the number of participants for osteo. In the Business Profession Code, Section 2454.5, which is continuing medical education. And this is the what was included in our sunset SB 798, where we requested that the CME reporting period cycle from 3 years to be changed to 2-year cycle to match the 2-year license renewals. Because the prior CME was not aligned with the license renewals, the board staff were receiving numerous phone calls from licensees who were confused as to what year of CMEs they needed to report in order to renew their license. So this new 2-year CME reporting requirement became effective January 1st of 2018. And because the Senate Bill 798 was not signed by the governor until October 13th of 2017, there was a very short amount of time to notify the licensees of this change. The board staff sent out emails to all licensees who had an email address available on file and put notification of this change on our website. Both the hard copy and online renewal forms were changed to reflect this new CME requirement. The staff has received numerous phone calls from licensees who were concerned that they would not have enough CME to be eligible to renew their license, as they thought that they would have 2018 to complete a 3-year cycle. The majority of licensees spread their 150 hours evenly over 3 years, which means that they would have completed an average of 50 hours per year. Those licensees would have no difficulty complying with the new 100 hours this first renewal cycle. However, those licensees who chose not to complete chose to complete the majority of the 150 hours in their third year, which would have been 2018, will not be able to meet the 100 hours, which would have been completed in 2016 and 17. So because of the short notice, the board staff will be working with these licensees who may have a deficiency during these first year implementation of this new statute.
Is that a small percentage of licensees, or is it fairly a lot?
It's not a very small percentage. It's less than half, of course. Most of the doctors are doing CME spreading it over fairly evenly, so they should have as close to 100, if not 100. So I don't think that we'll have too many that we have to work with, but we did get a lot of phone calls, and it was like, darned if we did and darned if we don't. You know, we thought that changing it to a 2-year cycle, it would please the physicians, and I think it caused a lot more confusion. But hopefully after this first year, it should become a lot easier.
So are we being somewhat lenient to those people that were kind of caught off maybe in a short span?
We will be, yeah. It's only because they only really had like a month and a half's worth of notice. Because the first renewal period that's going to be affected are those that are renewing in February of 2018. So. Any other questions? Okay. If not, then Corey will provide the enforcement report.
Good afternoon, board. Welcome. I'm ready for another sensational report on enforcement.
I know this is going to be outstanding.
I have some pillows in my truck if you need
a lot of those.
Yeah.
We always like the interactivity.
Well, okay, let me get started here. Try to get through this quickly. I don't think there's anything that just really jumps out like, I think it's pretty much like the previous reports. The following OMC enforcement report covers a 12-month period starting from first quarter of 2017 to the fourth quarter of 2017, so 12-month period. The report is divided into 5 sections: intake, investigation, enforcement, performance measures, and probation. And the data is reproduced from our Breeze enforcement reports. So middle of the page, section, we will see in data table 1 above under total intake. And that total intake, if you look on the data table, is on that lower third part of that data table. It says total intake. OMBC received 512 complaints. 31 of those cases were convictions, arrests. And during this period, 523 cases were assigned for investigation, and the average number of days to assign a case was 24. In figure 1-2 below, we see the intake totals for each month. In April 2017, there was a substantial increase in received complaints, while assigned complaints peaked at 73 in May. Received and pending cases decreased in December, and this is due to cases not yet inputted into the system. So I would say there's probably about maybe 10, 15 cases that when I wrote this at the time, so maybe there's even less now, so that hadn't been inputted yet. So I think that's why we see a little bit there. Page 2. And by the way, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to throw food at me or something. Figure 1.3 below, the bar graph illustrates the monthly average number of days to assign or close a complaint. The aging measures the period from the time the complaint is received in the office to the time the complaint is assigned to investigations. The performance target for intake is 30 days. The board met the performance target for the last 12 months, with one exception, the month of October, which averaged 32 days. The overall average for the last 12 months was 24 days.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, very good. Now those are averages because obviously there are cases that did exceed that.
So very good.
Okay, investigations.
Corey?
Yes.
Could you, for the students' benefit, before you go into this, explain the difference between a desk investigation and a field investigation. Just so they understand
Oh, okay.
the difference between the two.
Okay.
And make it work, you know.
Should I address them? Okay,
Yes.
students, okay, we have, when a complaint comes into the office, we receive it, we process it. The first part of that is an internal investigation, called a desk investigation. And so depending upon the nature of that investigation, in most cases, I would say, I'll get 80% of them remain at that desk investigation status. Now, if there are cases, for instance, that come in, we have a doctor we know for sure is over-prescribing, that will immediately, process it and immediately will go out to the field investigations. In field investigations, we have maybe 8 to 10 different field offices throughout the state of California. And so we assign it out to a sworn investigator, and they'll go out and, based on information that we've gathered, they will interview witnesses. They'll gather and secure any type of medical records or documentation that's pertinent to the investigation. They'll interview the respondent, the subject. Sometimes, depending upon if there's a criminal activity involved, they might do undercover. Just depends upon the nature of the allegation. So once it goes from that, from the field investigation, once their field investigation is done, it comes back to us. We determine whether we're going to send that off to the Attorney General to do a disciplinary action. Kind of an oversight.
How do we get those reportings? Where are they coming from?
I'm sorry?
Who's reporting or who's submitting the complaints? If you can just briefly tell us that. Like, I know, like, for example, if
Who reports the complaints? Typically it's patients. I would say 9 out of 10 are patients, but we have parents, we have
Other physicians.
Other physicians who will report. Pharmacists.
We have hospital.
We have anonymous.
Anonymous.
A lot of anonymous.
We get anonymous. We also have hospital disciplines that we get reported. Malpractice insurance, malpractice cases, settlements.
Pharmacists sometimes turn in, the report. Usually they're anonymous. They'll notice, hey, this doctor's overprescribing. It's a bad pattern. They'll send in, but you can tell from them because they've got all the, the lingo down, about what's going on.
So if you're a resident or an intern and you're at a party and you get a DUI, we find out.
Well, only if you're licensed.
Only if they have a license.
Which has to be your secretary. So don't get a DUI.
So after 2 DUIs, if you get 2 DUIs, the board will open an investigation in the matter, and more than likely will.
Well, it depends on the first DUI. If it was a DUI during lunch hour and they were planning on going back to work, we open a case immediately.
So if you're at an event, you call your Uber driver and be responsible. Sorry. Go ahead.
Where were we? Okay, so
desk investigations.
Desk investigations. For all desk investigations during this period, data table 2 above breaks down monthly totals for how many complaints were signed and completed, the monthly aging in cases pending. During this period, a total, not totaled, sorry, that's a typo, a total of 524 desk investigations were assigned, 494 were completed, 164 cases were pending. The average number of days to complete a desk investigation was 90 days.
Very good.
So I think, as long as I've been here, I think that our investigation totals are gradually increasing each quarter. We can see just bumping up a little bit.
We're investigating more people.
Well, getting more complaints are coming in. So our investigations levels are kind of probably the same in terms of maybe a little more now.
Would you say a majority of our complaints usually start off with office interaction or a bill?
Quite a large amount, yes.
They get a bill for a service and they go crazy.
They do.
Or they try to call the doctor's office to get something and someone's rude, and then it becomes the doctor's responsibility.
Right. Those are not really what we consider non-jurisdictional. The demeanor of a physician or the office policies are not within our jurisdiction. Right.
I mean, Health and Professions Code says you can't do anything about the bedside manner.
That's correct.
Can I continue?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right, so page 3, top of page 3, in figure 2.2 below, the assigned and completed caseload averaged a little below 50 cases per month, except for May, in which assigned cases peaked at 73 and completed cases peaked at 60 in September. Pending cases averaged a little over 100 until the month of May, when the caseload increased at roughly 150 for the rest of the period. Now this seems a little strange when we see this pending cases went up like this and it stayed up like this. I'm thinking the possibility of the reason why this is continuing to happen is that in May, I think maybe some cases were closed, but in our Breeze database system, there's these activities. Each time we do something, there's an activity code we put in there. We have to close that activity. If we close a case but yet keep an activity open by mistake, the system thinks it's still pending, even in those cases. So I'm going to go back and run some reports to see if that's why these pending levels are up at that level, and there are some cases are sitting out there that have some activities that haven't been closed. That's what I'm thinking. What the anomaly is in that, because it doesn't make sense to me why that pending is still up there so high like that and has stayed that way. That's my theory at this point. I don't know if it's the case. So. Okay, field investigations. Data, table 3 above, breaks down the monthly totals for field investigations assigned to the Division of Investigations. Completed cases are either closed with insufficient evidence or referred to Attorney General's office for disciplinary action. During this 12-month period, 18 cases were assigned to field investigations. 31, not 26, I'm sorry, it was 31 were completed, and 30 cases were pending at the end of December 2017.
If you look at the aging, you'll notice that the aging numbers are really high. And the way that we understand it is that because we outsource our field investigation, we don't have any control of because the medical board and our board share the same field people who do the investigation, and there's only a fixed number of them, and there's only so many people to go around to do what needs to be done. So we're unfortunately a victim of the system. Had we all the money in the world and we could have 1,000 investigators, we wouldn't be having this delay time, but that ain't reality.
So the next page, actually, that graph on the next page shows the comparison between desk investigation and field investigation aging. So the blue is the desk investigation, and the red bar is the field investigation.
You mean the blue is us and the red is them?
Right.
But I don't misunderstand me. Field investigation is very difficult. It's very time consuming.
Right.
And it does involve a lot of hours of hard work. So I don't mean to downplay their work, but I do want to say at least that when you look at the numbers, that's why there's a stark difference, is because the number of cases they're working are greater than the total number of cases that are desk people do.
Well, no, the opposite. The opposite is that there's less in the field. There's less cases in the field, but
that's right.
Yes, less cases.
Less in the field, but more intense.
Right. So in the desk investigations really go quickly, usually because a lot of them are just open. You would get it, we send them to the medical consultant, and then it's a no merit. Most of those cases are within 60 days to 90 days. And so when you average all those out, it comes out really low.
Well, I'm glad you were listening to me, so I know somebody's paying attention.
So, but when you have the cases in the field, you have maybe only 15 to 20 cases. But those cases tend to have a higher aging because you have less cases that are out there longer. So there isn't this, the averaging really close, the averaging of higher numbers usually is lower than the averaging of lesser numbers. Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that right. So, But the field investigations are always longer cases. Typically, they take a minimum of a year, for the investigator to gather the data, interview them to do it. So top of the page, figure 32 below compares the aging of completed desk and field investigations per month. The aging is the average number of days to complete an investigation starting from the complaint received to the date the investigation is completed. The year-to-date average to complete a desk or internal investigation is a respectable 90 days, about 3 months. Or 3 months. The year-to-date average for field investigations was 478, an increase from 420 from the last report. And I want to tell you that the previous report from last report, it was around like 380. So what we're seeing in the field investigations is gradually there's a higher and higher aging going on.
Is there a statute of limitations? We have one that's 3 years.
It's 3 years, yes, for investigations.
Yeah, no, we've lost cases because of statute, and it's because there's not enough investigators, and that's the problem that DCA is having right now.
Part of the problem too is when we had to go over to DOI about a year and a half ago.
Yes.
When we had to we shipped almost half of our cases over to DOI because HQIU they were so low on staff, we didn't have a choice. But even when we shipped those cases over, those investigators had to take those cases, re-review them, and almost start over again. So that was kind of part of the problem. And as you see in September, that red line, the September one, that's one case that was closed, and it took 985 days. That was close to the statute of limitations. In fact, that particular case had another case along with it. I mean, it was the same doctor, and we had 2 cases on him. The other case did. It reached statute of limitations and we had to close. And luckily, Angie was wise enough to talk to DOI, and we don't have to pay for that case because they blew it. Basically, they blew it. They waited too long, and we contacted them within a year before that was going to close, and they sat on it. So we didn't have to pay for that case. Okay. Aging for desk and field investigations. Now this is kind of the matrix where we look at each, the aging per time period. So this is all desk investigations and field investigations. In data table 4, figure 4.1, we see the aging matrix for the number of investigations that were closed per month within a specific time period. 280 cases were closed were completed within 90 days. 136 were completed between 91 and 180 days. 54 cases were completed between 6 months and a year.